everyone. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein, joined this evening by my dear friend Steve Pearlman. And tonight is a behind-the-scenes look at how we created the High Holiday services at Valley Beth Shalom. Steve, good evening. Thanks for joining me.
Hi,
It's
Rabbi. My
nice to be
pleasure.
together. So tonight, it goes without saying that these were holidays like none other. We've never had holidays like these, and and no synagogue had ever done anything like this before. And all of us were faced with a dilemma. And the dilemma was, how do you create a high holiday services that is spiritually satisfying, but you can't do it in person? At first, we thought perhaps it'd be possible to do some sort of hybrid where people could come in small groups, but it became very clear as the pandemic continued over the summer that we were going to have to create something that no one ever created. And what no one had ever created before was sort of Jewish sacred video. How do you do a high holiday service online? Steve Pearlman, my dear friend, was a part of a committee of VBS members who were thinking about how to do this and other things that the synagogue needed to do. And I asked him if he would join me and my colleagues, the rabbis and cantors of VBS, to try to figure out, what exactly it would look like to do a high holiday service. So, Steve, let's step back just a moment before we get to the high holidays, and let me ask you to tell us about yourself, where you're from, and how you got into television.
The short story. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in the big conservative shul in Portland, Congregation Neve Shalom. I believe you even have some connections to the clergy at Neve Shalom.
I do indeed.
Daniel Isaac, the former rabbi there,
Right.
Came down to UCLA to go to school here and stayed in LA. I knew I wanted to be in TV from a very early age. I just didn't know how to get there or what I was going to end up doing. I kind of thought that I would end up in TV news, and I fell into the entertainment business, literally. I mean, I started at a small company called Lorimar. It was in the mid 80s. They had a show on the air called The Waltons. They had a show called Dallas. They had a new show called Valerie that then became Valerie's Family, that then became the Hogan Family. So those were some of the shows that I started on early on as a research analyst in TV research. And so I kind of worked my way up through the studio system at Warner Brothers. It was Lorimar, then it became Warner Brothers, and then it became AOL for a short time, and got some stock options through that, which was very nice. The AOL.com thing didn't work out so well, but Time Warner swooped in and did that for a while, and then went into producing, and that was around 2008, 2009, and I've been producing and directing since.
So forgive me for asking a stupid question, but for those of us who aren't in the business, what's the difference producing and directing? What does a producer do, and what does a director do, and what does a writer do? And there's a person called a showrunner. What does that person do? So just give us a quick background of the kinds of things you've done in television, if you could.
Sure. The showrunner in television is typically a writer. The vision for a TV series always starts with the written word. It starts with the idea, the concept. And usually the writer is the showrunner. Sometimes you end up with a writer that comes in from outside of the TV business. So you get a feature writer or a playwright, or a blog writer, or these days people can come into television from all different sources, and they may not have the actual show running experience. And that's kind of where I fit in. That I've worked with a lot of writers who've never run a show before, or who just need help. The job of running a show, you're managing a company of 300 to 400 people. You're managing a budget of maybe $5 to $6 million per episode for a 1 hour series. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, generally more than one person can do. And I've been working on location a lot lately. A lot of shows are done outside of LA, which has taken me to Vancouver. I've worked in Australia. I recently came off of a show that was shooting in Puerto Rico, The Baker and the Beauty, for ABC. So I've worked a lot out of town. So the opportunity to actually step in to help at the temple when I was here, I was here because of COVID, because there was no production going on at all in the entertainment industry. So it was kind of an opportunity for me as well to do something that I enjoy and to give back. The role of a director is really much more specific to an episode of television or a movie. And in the movie business, the director is really the creative force. Once the script is there, the director kind of takes over and it becomes their movie. In television, you have generally a different director for every episode, so that the director is a guest, if you will, for every episode, and they come in and they're the ones that they'll pick the locations, and they'll work with the actors, and they'll kind of figure out what the camera shots are going to be. And it's really their job to take the script, the written word, and to figure out how to make it work through the eyes of camera, through the lens of a camera. So I've been doing more directing. I got into directing about halfway through the run on Once Upon a Time, which was a show that I worked on for 7 years up in Vancouver. And it's been a great way to just kind of take everything that I've learned and a lot of the different skills that I've had and interests that I've had, and kind of put it all into one place. Interestingly, on this project, for the High Holidays, we were doing live streams. So directing involved live television, which I haven't done since high school. And things have changed a little bit since then in the technology, but the basics of sitting in front of a monitor that has 4 little squares in it with 4 different cameras and saying, okay, that's the one that's going to be next. Get ready to go to camera 1, ready 1, take 1. That's still the same as it was in 1970 something when I was in high school.
So let's talk about this particular project. Thank you for the background. So midsummer, it became very clear to us at Valley Beth Shalom that we were going to have to, as it were, produce an online high holiday service. And we started looking at services from lots of different synagogues. Lots of synagogues were doing online services, including us. We were doing Friday Night and Daily Minyan, and we started looking at different editions of this from different synagogues around the country. Some of them very sophisticated, very well produced. Some of them really sort of amateurish and rather ragged. And we started thinking about, what do we want to accomplish? So talk to us about that. When you started working on this project and you started thinking about high holidays, you have a wonderful Jewish background. What did you want to accomplish? What did we want to accomplish doing this?
Well, the first thing that was really important to me after that Tuesday morning phone call where you kind of said I didn't have a choice.
Beware of rabbis calling on Tuesday mornings.
We got together on a Zoom meeting with all of the clergy, and we talked a little bit about what was going to be important for, I call it the show, it's the service, but I approached it the same way as I approach a TV show. It was important for me to hear from you and from the other rabbis and from the cantors what your expectations were, and to kind of start to get a sense from looking at a lot of the competitive things that we were finding on YouTube, congregations from around the country, and we would look at the videos, and it was really helpful for me to be able to get that feedback and say, that's a little too slick. I kind of like that, but and it was a way of kind of narrowing things down. And we saw things that ranged from very sophisticated production that was quite well done, but quite slick and lacking emotion, I would say. It had great production value, but it didn't have much emotional value, all the way to, on the other extreme, we looked at some Kabbalat Shabbat services that Nava Tehillah was doing in Israel, and it was literally a group of people in a park sitting on blankets barefoot, with kind of a bunch of instruments, and yet they were all singing together, and they were all of one spirit, and that gave us more emotion than the slickly, well produced thing that was being done by some of the temples that we looked at. So it's, how do you find the balance between that? And I think, the thing that we talked about quite a bit, and once we hired a production services company to do the actual television production work for us, we brought them into the same conversation. Was the high holidays is a time when typically, at VBS, the hallway is packed. We've got 4 or 5 packed rooms of people all day long, every day. It's the time when you get to see friends and people that you don't get a lot of time to see during the year. It's the time when everybody comes out, and it's a very social experience. And we were looking to replace that with a very unsocial experience, which is people, you're going to sit in your home, and you're going to watch the service on TV, which is a broadcast. It's a one-way broadcast. It's not interactive. It's not involving. And so how do we solve that problem? And how do we make the best we can? How do we give our congregation, our community, in this case, again, call them viewers, how do you give our community the ability to feel as if they are in the room, even when they're not? And that was really at the core, that was kind of the question that we were looking to solve, and the goal of the project as we moved forward.
That actually was the nicest compliment that I received from people after the service, after Rosh Hashanah, and then after Yom Kippur, was exactly that, by the way, that people said, I really felt like I was there with you, and I really felt I could pray. I really felt I wasn't just watching passively on TV. TV is a very passive thing. I mean, I sit there and I watch, and maybe I'll emote or I'll laugh or I'll cry, but it's mostly just watching it, taking it in. It's receptive, not and passive. But people felt I was really there with you. I really was part of the service. I could feel myself. In fact, the compliment that was a sort of backhand compliment was people said, I like this better than the in-person service, because I sit way in the back of the synagogue, and this time I got a front row seat. It was wonderful. So we really did.
There's actually a funny analogy or a funny anecdote that goes along with that. After that was actually one of the things that we tried to do was, and I'll get into this a little bit more in detail in a bit, but how can we take advantage of the medium? How can we take advantage of the fact that we're doing the service with cameras and on TV or on computer, and offer things that we ordinarily wouldn't get to see? And one of those that came to mind immediately was the Great Aleinu, which is obviously something that we do throughout the high holidays. And it's that time when the rabbi and the cantor literally go up to the ark and prostrate on the floor. And if you're sitting in the congregation in the sanctuary watching that, the minute that you go down a little bit, that you're out of frame. You're not seeing anything. And where did they go? And then they get up and everything continues. So we wanted to make sure that, that we took a camera literally right up there onto the bima, and we could be with the cantor, be with the rabbi, and not just be with on their backs necessarily. We didn't want to be on their faces, because that would have meant we would have had to put a camera in the ark, and we would have looked out and we would have seen all of the lights and all the gear and all the stuff back where the congregation usually sits. But we wanted to be up there. So we noticed this after the first day, after Rosh Hashanah morning services, was that the Torah that sits right in the center of the ark, the shelf that it sits on, the like velour or velvet or whatever the material that covers it, was literally like crumbling off.
No.
I mean, and I think Alana Zimmerman, our program director, or some saw it on the monitor, and like, we have to fix that. So after this, and it's the thing that when you're sitting out in the congregation in the back row, or even in the first row, you never see that. It's too far. You're too far away. But when you've got a camera right up there in the middle or in front, we saw it. So we had the staff actually came in after, and they were able to find another piece of material, and they fixed it all up. But if you look back at the services, that little shelf on the first Torah is going to be different, and that was the result of
so let's take this up. So you're used to working on a set that's been created for a show that you're doing. And the set is, carefully created to allow for certain kinds of camera work and certain acting work that has to happen. So you walk into the sanctuary at Valley Beth Shalom, and that's going to be your set. That's going to be your set. What problems does that present to you? What does it suggest to you?
So that was actually one of the first things that we took a look at. And you mentioned before, that we had been having some committee meetings earlier in the summer to talk about the, in general, the experience of what it would be like to watch the services on TV. And, one of the things that I mentioned was if you sit in the sanctuary and you participate in the services that way, it's like Grand Central Station on the Bima. It's people coming and going, and it's the people coming to open the ark, and it's the choir up in the choir area, and then there's a whole, like, the shift changes, and a whole group of people comes down, and a whole new group of people go up, and you have the Torah service, and it's part of the experience of being in the sanctuary and being a part of the service. And we weren't going to have that this year. We were going to have a rabbi and a cantor, and this big open space. I'm actually going to jump on. I've got some show and tell things, and I think if I can grab the screen share here, I can show a couple things that'll kind of help make sense of this. Also, while I'm doing this, I should just mention, I think for people that are joining us on Facebook and YouTube, if you have questions, you can write them onto the screen, and we'll actually be taking questions. All right, so let me do this. I'm going to. How do I do this? There we go. Okay, so this is, you should see now on the screen, our pulpit. This is our sanctuary. This is what I walked into when you hired me for this job and said, make it into a TV show. This would be kind of the view onto the rabbi's pulpit. The thing about television is it's all through a lens. So, or through a camera. So what people were going to be seeing at home was not necessarily this big, this big wide view of the bima. It was going to be more of this. It was going to be more of, when the rabbi was giving a sermon, or when a rabbi was leading prayer, or when the cantor was davening, it would be a person standing here with this big kind of void behind them. And I just thought that's not very interesting to look at if we're asking people to watch the show, watch the service for 2 hours. So I came up with this idea and actually did some concept. This is what we would call concept art in the TV business. This was just a picture of the sanctuary that I pulled off of the internet, and then I did these panels, examples of these panels, to kind of close off where the choir loft is on both sides of the pulpit, to shrink the space. So our big bima that is typically very busy and bustling with people and was not going to be this year, would be smaller and would be a little bit more intimate. Here's a picture again. This is more concept art. This was what we were assuming kind of a close-up of the cantor would look like. And I did these in Photoshop and just circulated them among all the rabbis. And again, it was to get feedback. And I had no particular dog in the race of, if you like this or if you don't like this. If you don't like this, we'll find something else. But everybody seemed to kind of like this. So then it was just a matter of figuring out how to do it. We got one bid from a company that was ridiculously expensive. And then I called one of my production designers that I worked with on Baker and the Beauty, because we had done something like this. And he hooked me up with a guy here, and we got it done literally in 4 days for like $2,000 for the entire thing. I mean, it was pretty inexpensive for what we got. And then, so that was the concept art. And then it turned into that. Here you've got Cantor Barron and his son-in-law and daughter, who joined him as part of our on-set choir. Our rabbi shot went from that to that. And Kol Nidre, we went into kind of a darker, moodier blue color. Rosh Hashanah, we were in a brighter, happier color. So we were able to have a little bit of fun with the colors and adjust them and really tailor that to the individual service. As I say, Kol Nidre, which Rabbi Farkas was officiating, he really wanted that service to convey a sense of night and a sense of the quiet of night and the mood of night. And so going into kind of the darker indigo blue was something that just kind of helped us along.
So as you start putting these services together, you're dealing with a cast of rabbis and cantors who are used to working in front of big audiences, big congregations, and have never done this in front of a camera. That's a whole new experience for us. As well, we had to reorganize the service because we knew that there were strict limitations on how much time we could take up. High holiday services are sometimes 5 hours long if you take the whole thing. And we understood that people could only really pay attention for about an hour and a half at max to an online service. So we had to start messing with the structure of the service. And then we started, as you said, we started to imagine that you could actually use this medium in ways that are advantageous to a service by showing things that we had, for example, never showed before. So let's take a look at some of those things, some of the things that you put together, some of the videos, if we could, and just see what were some of those things and what was our intention, what were we trying to accomplish by using these kinds of montages or videos or those kind of supplemental pieces. You got one to show us?
Yeah, sure. I think that again, each service, each service kind of took on its own personality based on who was what the service was, obviously, but also who was officiating, and we did. I should just back up. Also and explain. So we ended up doing 4 live stream services for what we called our main service. So we had Rosh Hashanah morning for day 1 and for day 2. And then we had Kol Nidre and we had Yom Kippur. We also did, I was responsible also for the Tot Shofar service, which was a pre-taped service, and the B'Yahad service, which was a family service. All of that was pre-taped. And the temple also offered a traditional service and the playground minion service, which were done separately from the operation that I was working on. So each service took on its own personality. The kid and the teen service, for example. Again, I'm gonna screen share here something. For the kids service, we found this fantastic puppeteer who was a former congregant, I believe, who lives in Boise, Idaho. I'm just looking for the right picture here. We were very lucky to have him he did a puppet show that was kind of the thing that we wrapped the entire service around these puppets. We also did a congregation of stuffed animals, which is what I'm going to show you here. And it was really about, how do you why can't I find this? How do you how do you attract kids? What are you going to do to get kids to tune in and to watch? I think I got this now. Here we go. So this was our tot service, which was our stuffed animals and the rabbis making the Torah processional or hakafah around the stuffed animals, which was adorable, and it helped the rabbis too, because they actually had somebody to play to. It wasn't just playing to a big empty room. On our B'Yahad service, on our family service, we did something with teens where we had them ask questions. It was kind of like kids say the darndest things. So we had them ask questions, and then the rabbis in the course of the service answer the questions. And we did it all on video. And so we got to see the kids be a part of the service. And it was a way of bringing kids into the service. And our model for that service was actually, in an odd way, Radio Disney. How does Radio Disney look to attract an audience that is one of the hardest audiences, to get and to keep, which is, 10 to 14-year-olds. They'd probably just about rather do anything else. In our adult service, one of the things that we did on a pre-tape was also the Torah Hakafah, which was for Rosh Hashanah and for Yom Kippur. It was interesting. There were easier ways to do a Torah Hakafah. I mean, on day 2 of Rosh Hashanah, which day 2 of Rosh Hashanah was much more of kind of just a straight davening kind of approach to the service. So we took the Torah out of the ark. The Torah went onto the podium. Yossi called the Aliyot. We had members of our community reading Torah from home, and that's the way we did it. And it all was perfectly fine. For Rosh Hashanah day 1, Cantor Barron had recorded a version of Romamu and sent it to me, and I kind of fell in love with the tune, the melody, but we didn't know quite what we were going to do with it. We didn't know how we could do a Torah Hakafah. We couldn't really go around the sanctuary because there would have been no point to that. There were no people there. So we started brainstorming, and one of the ideas was something actually similar to what VBS did for Simchat Torah just yesterday, with kind of a parade of cars. And that was a little bit of a riff off of, what we had seen at the end of the Democratic National Convention, actually, which was the cars coming in and honking, and it was moving us in the right direction, but tonally it just didn't feel right for what we wanted for the service. So what we decided to do was to invite people to come in on a Sunday morning. It was about 100 degrees in the valley, and stand and do a socially distanced Torah Hakafah with us. And originally, I'll show you kind of what the concept on this was. And again, this is just like proof of concept. Will it work? So this was we were originally going to do this with we thought we would get 100 people to show up on a Sunday morning, and we would do it out on the soccer field by the Levine Community Center, and we'd put people 6 feet apart, and we'd have the rabbi and the cantor with the Torah, and taking the Torah, and everybody would be wearing masks. It was important, to show that we were doing this properly as far as health and safety. And I went out there on this day where I took this picture, and it was scorching hot at 12 noon, which was around the time when we were going to be doing this, and just realized that wasn't going to work. So we ended up doing it in the Peskin Chapel, which is right outside of Shir Lopati. This is concept art. You can obviously see that there's work table and other stuff going on there, which I didn't feel like moving when I was there by myself, but I was able to put in our little stand-in figures anyway, just to circulate that, again, circulating it among the rabbis and the cantors and staff at the temple to see, is this a good approach? Is this how we want to do it? And we decided that we would do it. So, we went out there on the Sunday morning that we were pre-shooting this, and we marked out spots where people would stand. And Alana Zimmerman, I think, and my wife and a few others spent, from Saturday sundown until Sunday morning at 10 o'clock on the phone and on Facebook trying to recruit last minute people to show up. And we had a good turnout. We had probably had about 30 people show up. And we had Rabbi and Cantor in masks and with Torahs, and we went out there and we shot we shot the Hakafah probably 5 or 6 times going around the circle. And then it became kind of a matter of what do I went home that afternoon and looked at some of the footage, and I'm like, what do we do with this? Just to show the rabbi and the cantor carrying the Torah around the circle, that's 30 seconds. That's not even worth doing this as a from a film perspective. So how do you take this footage and kind of make it into something? And I should also just say, part of what we were doing here was not simply just taking the Torah out of the ark and putting it on the table. Again, there were easier ways we could have done that. We were looking at this from a perspective of how do you involve the congregation in a time when we really can't bring them into the sanctuary? How do we involve the congregation, make them feel like they're a part of the service? And it was a point in the service, kind of in between the davening of the kind of mushed up morning service, Musaf service, and what we were going into, the Torah service, where it felt like we just needed a little bit of a jolt. We needed just a little bit of fun, a little bit of a sense of life and levity. And so I'm going to run this. It's just about a minute and a half, and you'll see what we came up with, and we can just chat about it on the other side. Hopefully all this works with the sound. I think I got it. You can hear
That's very nice. That's a very nice moment in the service. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great piece of music. It was a real uplifting time. It was interesting to watch our crew, none of whom was Jewish, by the way, really get into this melody more than I think any other. They were tapping along, and it's that kind of melody that once you get it in your head, it's hard to get it out.
Right.
And it brought some, I think the general sense that I got from my own reaction watching it and the people that were in the control room around me was people were smiling. You watch that and you smile.
And the meaning of the ritual, I mean, the purpose of doing that isn't simply to give the congregation a break, which is what happens anyway, but the meaning of the ritual is to make the statement that this Torah belongs to the community. Doesn't belong to the rabbi. It's not locked up in the ark. You take it out of the ark and you bring it down to the community and you circulate it through the community, because the Torah belongs to the Jewish people. It belongs to the community. And I think that the visuals that you put up there convey that this is yours. This belongs to you. It belongs to every family. It belongs to everybody in the community, and everyone is entitled to come close to it. So I thought that it did this so very, very nicely. Now, there were some other challenges. I mean, one of the challenges we had to face is there are certain moments of the service which are silent. Now, we were able to eliminate, the rabbis and cantors worked to eliminate as many silent moments as possible, because silence is a time for people to change channel, So, but there are certain moments you can't. You're saying an Amidah for an evening service. How do you do a silent prayer? So you did some interesting things with that, right?
Yeah, we did a number of meditation. There were a number of meditation moments throughout the services in Yisker as well, where we had a quiet piece of music and some nice images that would allow people to kind of at least get into a mindset or be able to relax and kind of be at one with their own thoughts. The Kol Nidre Amidah was one in particular that that we were looking to do something a little bit different with. I think it was actually the only of the service of all 4 services. It was the only Amidah that we actually davened silently, and so we looked to do something different, a little different. And I found this. I spend my time just kind of trolling on YouTube for ideas, and I found this, which this is just a still frame I'm going to show, which I thought was interesting. It was letters coming up off of a page, and these letters here, they started the process of kind of flying, and then eventually all the letters were kind of flying around, and it was kind of very elegant and graceful. And my dad is a Hebrew calligrapher, and so I kind of grew up appreciating the artistry of the actual letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And so jumping off from this this idea of these floating letters, started talking to Rabbi Farkas about if we were to do something like this, what would what letters would make sense, what prayer would make sense, part of the Torah, part of the Bible, and he pitched the Untitled Chapter, which is a central prayer to the high holidays, where you have the 3 words Teshuvah, Tefillah, Tzedakah in that we could highlight. So again, I'm going to play the video. It's about 1.5 minutes, and then we can chat about it. But this is what we ended up doing for the Kol Nidre Amidah. I don't think I did the music. Hold on a sec. You had the music?
Yeah, it's on.
So that's what we ended up doing. And again, it's kind of one of those things where we tried to take advantage of the medium, tried to take advantage of the fact that that's not something that we would be able to do really if we were in the sanctuary together as a community. And I think it was different, and it was evocative, and some of the interesting things that went along with that. As we were putting it together, I hired a guy that I had worked with on Once Upon a Time. He was an editor that I worked with on Once Upon a Time to do that. So if you sensed a little Tinkerbell in there, it may not have been an accident.
Right.
so he put it together, and originally Rabbi Farkas and I had talked about it being about a minute long. So Paul, the editor, put it together in a minute format, and it was too short. It just didn't feel like we were in it for long enough. So we needed to expand it, which basically meant tearing the whole thing apart. You can't just add another 30 seconds. You kind of have to tear the whole thing apart and rebuild it. And Noah also wanted to use a different piece of music than what we had originally done. So that was fine, but finding music that is, public domain music, was a challenge, actually. And I found this one piece that I really liked that I thought would have worked perfectly. And I'm reading the description. It was on YouTube, and it was public domain, and we could have used it. And it said something like, "Perfect for your church services." And I'm like, no, I can't. So I didn't.
Who knows? You make people feel comfortable. Listen.
Yeah.
No, see, what's really interesting about that I really enjoyed, and I think many people commented to me about this as well afterwards. So after, like, I watched our services, of course, and then after the services were over, I got to watch them again. And then I went and did what I never get a chance to do this. I watched lots of other synagogues. I have a lot of friends who are rabbis. I have students who are now rabbis, and I never get to watch them give sermons because I'm working holidays, right? So I got to go back and watch lots of my friends doing their services, doing their sermons. And what's happened now is that we've created a new form, a new art form. It's Jewish sacred video, right? It's deeply Jewish. It's involved with our culture, with our faith. It's sacred because it's prayer video. We're not just doing cultural stuff. We're not just doing music or drama. This is part of a worship service that's supposed to evoke certain worshipful emotions. But no one's ever done Jewish sacred video before. The Christian community, of course, has, a lot of evangelism online, all these famous evangelists. We never did any of that kind of stuff. So now there's a new art form, and that kind of thing that you did, that beautiful thing with the letters, as well as the very moving hakafa, and so many of the other little montages and photographic moments that you introduced into the service have now become part of a new art form, a new idiom. So someone's going to have to curate this one day and create a sort of a museum exhibition on Jewish sacred video.
I'll show you this. So doing this also got to my competitive edge going a little bit. So what do I do after actually it was on Erev Rosh Hashanah, which we did not do an Erev Rosh Hashanah service at VBS because we did our Seder. So that night, I started trolling YouTube to see what other temples were doing so that I could see, if there were any good ideas, I would have gladly stolen them, and also looking for things that I wanted to avoid. So this is a comparison. I thought this was interesting. One of the things that we did, and this kind of goes back to your earlier question, Rabbi, about dealing with rabbis and cantors who are used to performing to a big room full of people, but not to a camera. And what are some of the challenges of that is you have to be comfortable looking at a camera. And one of the things that we did, and by the way, I learned a ton through this experience, and hopefully we won't be in the same situation a year from now, but if they are, there's things that I would do differently. And there's things that I've learned that I thought, we did that well. And there's things that we did that I'd say we can do that differently or better next year. This is a comparison of our rabbi sermons to some of our dear competitors, our close competitors. So, what you see with what we did with Rabbi Feinstein and Rabbi Hoffman on the far left is for their sermons, we stayed on a single. We stayed on a close-up through the entire sermon. The camera didn't move. The camera was on the same level as the rabbis because we wanted the rabbi to be able to connect to the person on the other side of the camera. Now, I will say, because you're going to catch me on this, on your sermon, Rabbi Feinstein, on day one of Rosh Hashanah, I did actually cut out to a side angle once I didn't like it, and we never did that again. Um, but basically, this was how we approached the rabbi's sermons, to try and allow the rabbis to connect directly with people at home. Stephen S. Wise, this was the rabbi's sermon. They were on these big wide shots and on side shots quite a bit throughout their sermons. Sinai Temple was also on a close-up, but their camera was down below. So you got this sense of the rabbi and the cantor kind of towering over over the congregation, as if you were sitting in the first row, straining your neck to look up at them. And then Wilshire Boulevard Temple did a lot of these angles which kind of showcased their sanctuary. They did not do much in the way at all of just a close-up of the rabbi or the cantor, for that matter, looking at the camera. And I think that makes a big difference. If you're trying to connect with somebody on the other side, is to look at them. And again, we looked at a lot of other services and saw things that we liked and saw things that we didn't like going in. And when you have a side angle where the rabbi is looking like this and the camera's over here, like it is right now on the Zoom, you feel like the rabbi's talking to somebody else, who's not even there, by the way.
Right.
And we wanted to try and avoid that, and I think I think that worked. I'll show you, because I think we're kind of getting to the end of the hour here, and I want to be able to show some of these pictures because I think people might enjoy them. This is just a little bit of the look of behind the scenes as we were shooting. So this, of course, is Rabbi Farkas. We pre-shot his Kol Nidre, his opening kind of kavanah, or his speech to the congregation, and one of the things, and I think this was one of the things that we spent a fair amount of time talking about, was the rabbi's opening message for each of the services, and how they would feel and be different from one another. And I think, Rabbi Feinstein, your opening kavanah on Rosh Hashanah day service, I think very appropriately just kind of set the tone for the entire high holiday experience of walking down that aisle of the empty sanctuary, and talking about the times where that sanctuary has been full and robust, and all the memories that you have personally in that room. Rabbi Farkas went in a totally different direction, with this is now the third of our live stream services, and he didn't want to just repeat what you had done or what Rabbi Hoffman had done. So he told a story in a different way that was very much involved with him kind of getting dressed and putting on his kittel, and interestingly, the inspiration for that from a visual perspective, something that you probably wouldn't anticipate, was a show on Netflix. It was a cooking show on Netflix, which was, it's called Chef's Table. And it's a cooking show done in a way that you normally wouldn't do a cooking show. And visually, that was kind of what we took our inspiration cue from. Again, here's same thing. Here's a look of, where we had Chris Harden. We were so lucky to have him back and joining us for the high holidays. He was down in front, where we took 3 rows of chairs out of that section of chairs for the piano. You can see we have cameras there. This was a pre-shoot day. Here's another view of that. This is pre-shooting for the Kol Nidre service. Here was our control room over in Burdorf Hall. Everybody masked. Here was Rabbi Feinstein, I think that's actually you standing back there in the very back. And we had some choir members in the back of the sanctuary, actually back in Glazer Hall, singing along with Cantor Barron and with Cantor Fox. We had a jib arm, 18-foot jib arm. Here we had 7 more rows of chairs taken out. I think they should just leave those chairs out until it's like we're already partway there on the remodel of Nizhnik. So, you know, I think that's actually a good thing. We had 4 cameras that we ran for our live stream. So we had our jib, we had 2 unmanned cameras, which gave us our close-ups on the rabbi and the cantor. And then we had a handheld guy that was kind of going around, going up to the bima a lot. Here, just as another kind of look, this was where we did the Yahad service with Rabbi Hoffman and Rabbi Taff, and obviously a big empty room with lighting gear, very different than how you would normally experience the high holidays.
Well, thank you for that tour. That was a wonderful tour, and thank you for sharing. What impresses me so much is, especially you talk about the different camera angles and the way that you set up these shots. Was, you have a wonderful sensitivity to this, very professional, obviously, of the highest caliber. But the emotional, the difference in the emotional impact of a camera angle like this and a camera angle like that. And so that the visual, you have a wonderful sensitivity to the visual power of the medium. And that's what you brought to this. So, and people have been so complimentary that they really felt that they were touched by the experience. And you did something wonderful, Stephen. There's a beautiful line in the Megillah, in the book of Esther, when Mordechai is talking to Mordechai is talking to Esther and trying to talk her into going and challenging Haman. And he says to her, maybe it was for a moment like this, that God intended this, that God intended all of this. And I'll offer you the same compliment. You're a wonderful TV director, wonderful TV producer. You've had enormous success in Hollywood, and now you've taken something that you're so very good at and applied it to something that I know is very deep in your own heart. And maybe all of that training was just for this, so that you could create magnificent high holiday experiences.
Where the rule was, don't make it feel too Hollywood.
Don't make it feel too Hollywood. We don't have $3 million an episode, right?
Right.
But we're gonna try and do something special, and
it's funny, some of the, just anecdotally, some of the things that happen along the way that you don't expect or you don't anticipate. We hire this company out of Orange County to come up here and produce the services for us, and they have a solid resume, and they were great to work with. Their name is the Beverly Boy Productions. It was the most Jewish sounding name that we could find.
Right.
They don't speak any Hebrew. They don't know the service. They don't speak any Hebrew. So, if you think about it, it's like really working in a foreign language. And that became very clear to me very early on in the project, where literally every single element of the service got a number, a unique number. And I kind of became notorious for my rundown sheets that I would circulate to everybody at midnight. But every line of the service had a unique number. Every musical cue had a unique number. Every playback element had a unique number. So the production crew, who was responsible for pressing the buttons and making it work, actually knew what we were doing. Another small thing that, again, you would never think to go exploring to see how many electrical outlets there are in Nizhnik Sanctuary. There's 4. Which when the sanctuary was remodeled in the late 80s, that was probably enough. What do you need outlets for in the sanctuary?
Right.
Nobody's using anything that you need an outlet for. Well, it turns out to run a live stream with 4 cameras and lights and monitors and all that kind of stuff, you need more outlets.
Mm-hmm.
So we're running cables from every corner of the building just to bring power in, just so that we
Right.
could do the service.
And so people understand this thing. So the running sheets where every piece of the service was exhibited for an hour and a half service, the running sheet had 140 lines.
Yeah,
And that,
I can, I
and
can.
not just that, but one more thing is that, when we watch television, we're not aware of this, but when the camera goes from a wide angle to a close up, that's because there's someone giving that order. There's the running sheet. That's what it looks like. So you were sitting in the control room just with the directors, going fade in, fade out, camera one, camera three, camera four, camera five. And, we weren't aware of this because we were in the sanctuary. We were actually running the service. But there's tremendous amount. You can see how complicated this is. So it became a tremendous project, just a remarkable project, actually.
Well, it was, it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
I will say, I kind of get off on these things. For me, it was a lot of fun.
Good,
It
because
was,
next year we're doing it again, my friend. I mean, I would love to see this pandemic come to an end, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to have to do something like this next year. So don't throw away the running sheets, and
yeah,
hang on to all the camera instructions, and we'll be back. Steve, I want to thank you tonight for sharing your expertise with us tonight. And of
my
course, as
pleasure.
I've said many times, thank you for sharing everything that you contributed to our holiday experiences. And to everybody watching at home, if it's not too late, we wish you Shana Tova, a happy, healthy, sweet New Year, and thanks for joining us tonight.